Dear Rentals Club members, for this new video, we have the pleasure of having Simon Lehmann, who is the founder of AJL Consulting. He's, of course, well known in the travel industry, moderator of a lot of conferences, but also as the former CEO of Interhome as well. He's been working with a lot of companies like HomeAway, for example, and very active in merger and acquisition markets all over the world, especially in Europe and the US. So Simon, it's a pleasure to have you. Where are you right now?
Thank you very much, Thibaut. I'm currently at home in Switzerland in my home office, and it's great to be here. And thank you for asking me to contribute.
Well, you're welcome. It's great to have you. Are you also confined? What's the situation in Switzerland these days?
Absolutely, we are very lucky people because we're living in a house, so we have a garden, so we can go outside with our kids. Actually, we go for walks as well, but we pretty much on the last phase of a lockdown, but we're still allowed to basically go walking. Maximum a group of 5 people are allowed on the street together with the normal social distancing, and we're living in a suburb where there's mostly houses, so we have quite a bit of space, and we're right next to the forest. So we've been home since Friday last week, so that's now day 10, and we're getting ready to spend a lot more time at home. So we're keeping our kids busy, homeschooling, and so far the spirit is still very high, so that's great, and we're keeping ourselves busy with the industry and having a lot of conversations during the day with all the boards that I'm currently involved with. So it's definitely interesting times, to say the least.
Yeah, and thank you again for doing this, because, I mean, obviously these are special times when we ask your friends or colleagues, how far can you work from home these days? And I really wanted to have you here because you can bring this perspective to us about what's going on in the world of trends, and talking, for example, about different markets, or talking about what companies could be doing right now, or what you see in the future. These are things I think we can bring here today and try to do this in a few minutes we have now. And starting and just basically, you said you just have this conversation with a lot of property managers or companies this last day. So overall, what do you see in the market? What's going on?
Absolutely. Well, interesting enough, a week and a half ago, the Shorties Award still went ahead, and Short Stay Show still went ahead, to a surprise of many people. But because I was speaking there, moderating a panel, talking about M&A together with Graham Donahue and Tyler from OYO, it was an interesting conversation to be had. Actually, the day already started interesting in the morning. On Wednesday, flying to London, I literally had a private jet from Zurich to London because there was pretty much no passenger on board. So you already start thinking, things are going to change for a while. The Shorties Award, interesting enough, we're still in good spirits. There was sanitizer there. People are trying to keep a certain distance to each other, but the spirit was still okay on the boat, obviously. And I think it was a good sort of finishing on a good note for a while in terms of our industry, and keep that spirit going. Actually, Thursday, interesting enough, there was still quite a bit of attendance. We believe there was about 60% no-show, but there were still some guests. That means we had more quality time in actually talking to each other about what's going on. So for us at AJL was actually not bad, because I had Nicholas there as well, my account manager from Barcelona, and we were able to have some very interesting conversations with our customers and sort of brace for what's coming. And people, especially on the M&A front, you could clearly start seeing the differences. Short Stay Show is more focused on short-term rental and therefore urban, and a little bit less on leisure. I mean, obviously HomeAway had a big stand there, VRBO. Sykes Cottages had a big stand there, but the rest was more tech suppliers. And yeah, I mean, everybody used the time to have intensive conversation and sort of start to think what's going to come and hit us, right? So I think also, one other thing, in January, I had the pleasure to be part of the STR Legends group in Cartagena, which was founded by Eric Muller and Jasper. And the spirit was incredible. So there was like 24 individuals who run their own STR businesses in the US, and so that means I'm seeing now different facets. I'm seeing I have a view on the US market, and I have a view on leisure and urban markets in Europe as well.
And it's two examples. So you're mentioning it's two different markets, also different types as well as property managers, right? People just STR legends building their business and starting out, and also Short Stay Show, for example, which is a show in the UK, but is a European importance now. It's also, you have a lot of property managers from traditional areas and urban areas as well. So you can different geographics, different types of people in contact with. So that's
absolutely
two things. So January, February, even early March in the UK, still things going pretty okay.
Yeah, I think what I said there as well is that, people ask me about predictions and say, what are the trends? I said, look, at the moment, still until we don't have any our feet on the ground, I think it's very hard to make predictions. I said in London, when people asked me, I said, look, the situation is changing by the hour. And I think it still is. So as these measures from the different governments came in, and as the corona spreads and you have more infected people, I think governments are still reacting. So how does that impact each industry? We just simply don't know. We're just trying to keep insane and basically keep alive and help each other. I mean, we will see some amazing things, solidarity, and I strongly believe the earth will look different once we're going through that. It will have devastating results in terms of death. I've just looked at some statistics, and it's definitely older people that are suffering the most. The nature is rejuvenating. I mean, you all of a sudden have a blue sky outside, and the earth is moving on, and probably our fish will come back, and a lot of animals. I heard a friend of mine who's seen some boars in his car park, which he hasn't seen for like 20 years. So actually the wild is reacting very fast, and we need to be patient. So let me go a little bit deeper on that. Mm-hmm. In terms of separating the businesses into three sectors. I would like to keep the US separate for the time being, and I would like to look at Europe as the one first. I've had the pleasure to be in the vacation rental industry for 15 years now. So we went through quite a few crises in the past. Either the financial crisis 2008, we had SARS 2003, we had the big volcano in Iceland. So we had the chicken flu as well. So we had a lot of different situations we had to deal with, either economically, but also from a health standpoint, which had a direct effect on the economy. And interesting to see is that the first thing that is happening in the leisure industry is that a lot of markets turn into more domestic markets, right? So the UK will have definitely more packs in the UK. We've seen that with Brexit already, where people, the pound was under pressure. So a lot of English people stayed at home and made vacation in the UK. And we see that in other markets as well. France is a very strong domestic market, always has been around 60 to 70%. We will see increase that this year as well. People stay in France, they will go on vacation in France. The same will definitely happen to the Italians, which will probably have a longer time to recover. Hopefully they can get this additional infections under control, and Italy will suffer a great deal. Less domestic strong markets will have it very tough, and I want to talk about Croatia and Spain, who will depend heavily on inbound markets, which have a less strong domestic market. But I think Spain will definitely see something like 50% domestic travel, and it will come back domestically. And the same thing we will see in Germany. Germany will be a very strong domestic market this year. Prior to the short stay show, I had the pleasure to be a speaker at the Traumferienwohnungen.de event in Bremen, where I was talking about the future of vacation rental, and I predicted a very strong domestic year for all vacation rental markets.
So domestic travel on the up, obviously in Europe, which basically means, because we hear a lot about drive-to markets, but you're right, drive to markets in Europe means your own home country. Well, unless you're in Luxembourg, which is very small, and probably you have to go abroad. But jokes aside, it's interesting that you already make distinction between countries that have maybe a lot of supply, like Spain or Croatia. Croatia, people not in Europe maybe not know that, but it's one of the biggest markets in vacation rentals in whole Europe. Obviously depends. It's a small country, so it depends a lot on international things, people coming over. So it's very interesting distinction already.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, and in Switzerland, we will see something similar. You know, Switzerland has less supply, but we have a beautiful country as it is that might have a good impact on our local hotel industry, where people will definitely stay closer to home this year. And it's hard to sort of predict further out. So I think the package travel and the overall travel deferred at least for a longer period to come than the drive-in markets, as you mentioned. And then so that's the urban business. And let us not forget leisure business. Excuse me. Let us not forget the leisure business has been around for a very, very, very long time. I mean, I always make the same example. Interhome was founded in 1965, which was sort of the first big commercial vacation rental company starting rent out of chalets in Switzerland for the UK markets, and then grew into a pan-European leisure vacation rental company. So 1965 is a long time. That was even before I was born. So that business has been there, and it's been solid, and it's been going through ups and downs, but it always recovered exceptionally well because it's a good way of taking vacation. But the urban business is a totally different game, right? So urban has really just started to thrive when marketplaces like Airbnb came into the market. You know, even Booking.com or HomeAway were strongly more focused on leisure. Also in the past, and then HomeAway tried with certain things. Expedia made some acquisition with Pillow and ApartmentJet to sort of get into the more urban markets, but Airbnb was so strong in that market, and they just created this massive amount of supply, and therefore the market is super young. I mean, that market is 10, 12 years old. It has been super highly regulated. It has been battered by regulatory issues. So it hasn't been easy to grow a sustainable, good, profitable, long-term urban short-term rental business. And I always said, Airbnb has created more entrepreneurs than anybody else. Maybe Uber has created more entrepreneurs because you needed only a car to have a business. And in short-term rentals in urban, you need an apartment. That's how most of these guys started out, right? But scaling that is extremely difficult. It's because the market is super competitive, and so far nobody has really proven before the crisis hit us that this is a sustainable and profitable business to be run. A lot of the larger ones like Hostmaker started to fade away before the crisis came, which clearly indicated, hey, scaling across many different jurisdictions is very challenging. Each market is different. We're still in the people's business. We're still, we still need relations to owners in the destinations. And just being successful in London doesn't mean you're successful in Madrid or Barcelona or any other large European city. So scaling has been very difficult, and investors poured a lot of marketing dollars into it, and they try to leverage their technology as well, where technology has become a commodity. So, differentiating yourselves in the urban space was super hard. And then you're working with occupancies like 70, 80% occupancy, which the leisure industry, let us not forget, the leisure industry has always been seasonal. Either it was a winter destination with, let's say, 10 to 12 weeks availability or bookability, or it's been the leisure industry who had like 24 to 26 weeks of season, but it's always been seasonal. And these people are used to seasonality models, hiring seasonal staff when ramping up the operation and then slow down again in October, November through the Christmas period, whatever. So urban had a lot more sort of cash flow, but also was working on far less bigger margins. And therefore, to sustain something like that with a downturn like what Corona is now giving us is basically impossible to survive. So, and a lot of these companies have been VC funded, and anybody who had maybe before the virus hit us a run rate of 12 months or 15 months of financing, that has now been compressed to maybe 3-4 months of run rate to still maintain the business. And then after that, they would have to start raising capital. So it will be very interesting to see how I think the urban business will close to disappear and then maybe come back again later down the track with probably the different models and different ways of looking at it. I think a lot of the regulatory pressure that these businesses had will probably evade, because now people will be happy to have tourists back in town, and maybe a lot of leases will be lost because people can't afford them anymore. So maybe you can start renting them out. And the third then came in was the master lease business, right? Which we always said this is hyper risky, because at low interest rates it was a very interesting business model just to take master leases, getting capital at a pretty low rate and putting like 200-400 million worth of debt on your balance sheet by master lease commitments, while you had able to finance those with credit facilities of 2-3%, so cheap money. And all of a sudden revenue disappears. So all these master lease companies will either not survive or come back out of it with a potentially different business model. They need to rethink all their contractual obligation with real estate owners. I think the ref share guys will come out a lot stronger than the ones who are committed to master lease. And we're hearing words that some of the very large ones have actually already ceased operation, but it's not confirmed yet.
So if I understand correctly, traditional vacation rental companies, it's in their DNA to be a bit more flexible,
resilient as well.
Resilient, right? And they're used to flexing their costs at some point because of seasonality, for example. They can react faster. And for the urban markets then, because also I guess master leases were probably also stronger in the urban markets, obviously. So do you see, when you see, it's pretty impressive, right? When you see, well, that's, for the second example, urban markets, a lot of companies will disappear. Do you see that then for vacation rental owners, as individuals, they will be the first one to get back online in cities, like people who have like one apartment, where you said maybe restrictions lifting up in some areas and maybe individuals will get started again, but the companies themselves will have to reinvent themselves, right? That's what you're saying. The supply maybe will come back up online, but the property management companies will have to be born again in a way.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is actually totally contrary to our thesis that we had prior to the crisis, right? We always said the long tail of property managers, like in Europe, in 6 with less than 20 properties, that will eventually disappear because you need more muscles to actually survive in this competitive market environment, and therefore the larger ones will get larger, and the small ones will eventually fade away, and RBOs will fade away. And yeah, and now with that summarized from you perfectly well, that these larger ones who have, cannot bear their operational expenditure right now, they will either cease operation or just go down to a bare minimum, and then we'll have to either start again or reinvent themselves, where the RBOs will come back up again, because once we're recovering from this massive incidents, is that people will look for additional income. So of course they will rent out whatever they have available, and the RBOs will eventually come back again. And then maybe it will happen in another 2 or 3 years, where things will be pushed into larger operators back again. I mean, this situation will have a far bigger impact on the urban market than it will have on leisure market. There's no doubt about it.
And how different, because we talked about Europe, right? And how different does it play out in the US? This urban versus traditional markets, is it sort of the same, or are there different factors in the US that make things play out differently?
I think one thing that we will learn once we're surviving this crisis is it's all about cash in the bank, right? And it's all about, what is my run rate? How long can I survive without starvation? And how long can I survive without a job? Or how long can I survive without a business? I mean, it has become the brutal reality that, in the US, there's thousands and hundreds of thousands of individual entrepreneurs who worked on project as an independent. They have no insurance, they have no social insurance, they have nothing. They will just be wiped out. And a lot of these short-term rental guys who started with 1-2 properties, they grew to 20, 30, they made a good cash, they were able to go on holidays for 2-3 weeks, had a great car, they made good money. And then, but they didn't build any reserves at all. They built, they have third-party service providers like cleaners, like laundry, whatever. Then, things were going well. They had to navigate through regulatory issues, which some of them were obviously battered very heavily in certain cities in the United States. And then all of a sudden somebody turned off the tap and they just disappeared. I mean, I have to say I'm part of the chat of STR Legends by Eric Muller and Jesper, Get Paid for Your Pad. And this is this group we met in Cartagena this year, and the messages that I'm reading there are simply devastating. They're now turning furniture into cash. For businesses, for units that have taken on contract, which they furnished, they just take these furniture now and sell them just to create a bit of cash for themselves. And obviously, wind down the business to a bare minimum if they can survive, and then it will start again. And now it's just about everything that you have, turn that into cash, reduce your OPEX to basically zero. You can't hold anybody. And this is the STR business, but we've also heard yesterday that Vacasa has now laid off 500 people in the United States as well, which is devastating. And that's more the leisure business, but also the business itself, even though it has been around for many years, it's still younger than the European markets. Also the leisure markets, the short-term rental, the same, and therefore, it navigates differently through downturns like this. And Vacasa was able to raise quite a bit of capital. And trust me, I spoke to a few people in London who said to me, "Hey, thank God we just closed our round, because it gives us some longer time to survive, being a meta search company or being at some other company that has just simply been able to raise capital at the right time, which gives them a longer run rate." Vacasa has raised a considerable amount of money, but they now need to run down their operational expenditure. They're very leisure focused, they're not urban focused, and they've already started to lay off hundreds of people in the United States. So and I believe it's only the start.
So you obviously can't predict any things, and you've already hinted at things like domestic travel will be very important for some areas. We hinted as well as for maybe more traditional or older, let's say, vacation rental companies in resort areas, it would be let's say easier maybe to survive, or at least they have more in their DNA, stronger ways to survive than younger companies in urban areas. What else can you? It's also, we talk about this credit crunch happening, right? It's hard to predict, but what does it mean that you right now need to have 3 months of money in, or what do you see? What can people do for profitability, and what other trends you see?
Absolutely.
To survive?
So I think, first of all, the classical short-term rental, vacation rental business who doesn't have any lease commitment is not going to suffer from any cash out, right? So the traditional business where you're renting out the secondary home of an individual person, you will maintain that contract. You have no costs. The only issue that you're going to have is that probably some of the owners, they will not be able to pay their mortgages anymore on their secondary homes. So that's another problem. But we have seen that in 2008 in Spain, where a lot of banks have taken over villas in the coast of Spain because the owners couldn't afford the mortgage anymore. So that will be a different game once that is happening. But then you can still rent it out because the bank cannot sell it, so they might as well use it to create cash flow. And that's what happened in Spain at the time, where banks just gave out a lot of inventory to property managers and just to rent that, so at least they had some cash serving the houses that they've taken over the mortgages. So I think now, being a father of 5 children myself, it's the question you're asking yourself as well: what is my run rate, and how is this going to affect everything around us? I think in terms of an operator, I would probably foresee at least a 3 months run rate in terms of cash. We don't know, we know that a vaccine is away probably 12 to 18 months. We want to break the peak now so our health systems can cope with the infected, but this will last for a while. So I think we'll probably see a bit of an easing of a situation, but I think anybody should now sort of try to protect themselves on a 3 months cash run rate to sort of get through this on a minimum basis.
Right. So I think that's the urgent thing to do now, to protect themselves. Simon, thanks a lot. I think we've been talking about a different perspective. It's also interesting because it's a very calm conversation, but talking about harsh things happening right now to the whole industry, right? Colleagues, friends, our own involvement in some companies. So it's very great to have this overall perspective. Also, talk about immediate actions people can be doing to preserve the run rate, right? The money they need for the next 3 months. I'm sure plenty of people have taken actions now, but it's important to repeat.
Yeah, absolutely. I could not have agreed with you more, Thibaut. And I think you, as a perfect example, showing we can contribute to our customers and be together and stand together on this. And this is why I'm more than happy to support such initiatives. I was in calls with Amy on some conference calls, and there's many other webinars going on. And also at AJL Consulting, we're trying to keep now all the conversations with our customers up, keep them at spirit, help them where we can. We need to survive. We want to survive as well together with them. We have launched, ironically, we were talking about this for quite a while, and it sort of started at the host conference last year where I said, guys, we need to start looking at profitability revenue, right? And it's like we were able to feel it, that we are so vulnerable to any economical downturn, and I was not even looking at obviously I was not looking at a virus when I said that. I was more looking at interest rates and things like that, and say, we have cheap money. Anything changes on the interest rate, it will be tough on all of us. We're now milking the system. We're milking the markets and industry to its max. And it will not need a lot for a lot of them to tumble if only interest rate starts. Now we have a totally different situation, right? So Nicholas and I started to work on that. We published an article just literally a week before this whole thing hit, talking about profitability. This is the key to it, and I wish I could have been heard a year before. I probably could have prepared and saved a few of the companies out there, get them to understand their P&Ls, get them to understand what are their cost drivers, and not to look at maximizing revenue, but actually taking all costs, variable and fixed costs, into consideration when pricing is being done. And whereas the pricing solutions always look from the top down and say, okay, this is the comp set, this is what the rates are, supply and demand, this is what you should do, but taking the full cost into consideration. And this is a tool that we're just in the process of finalizing. We have an MVP already. We already, basically what we can do, Thibaut, or you can do for us, if you have customers who want to test that with us, we are be more than happy for them to reach out to us and say, hey, we want to work with AJL. Can you show us what you do? We show how to allocate fixed costs and variable costs into your cost structure, and then calculate your selling price going forward. So I think anybody who can go eventually out of the survival mode, we need to be home for a while. So that means we will have time to at least safeguard what we have and then start thinking about the future. And I think we at AJL want to use that time to help people get fitter and stronger for the future, and help them to understand that we need to look at all our cost bases before we start making pricing decisions, because profitability will prevail. And just to finish that off, why is that? I think this is important. We have always talked about the airline and the hotel industry in comparison to revenue management. But these guys have always separated the two because they have far higher fixed costs. If a plane flies from A to B, the fixed costs are there: fuel, staff, the costs are not much higher if it's 200 passenger aboard or 100 passenger on board. But any additional passenger will have a positive contribution. And in the hotel, it's the same. Hotel is there, it has fixed costs, it has people to run it, and any additional room that is rented has a positive contribution. So they didn't have to take the fixed costs as much into consideration when making pricing decisions. In our industry, it's totally different. Any additional booking will bring more variable cost to the business than not, because if the booking doesn't happen, you don't have distribution commission, you don't have cleaning costs, you don't have check-in costs, you don't have key handling costs, you have nothing. So the component of variable cost per booking is a lot higher than hotels and airlines. This is something we have totally underestimated and felt, hey, any additional booking will give me a positive contribution. But the truth is actually it doesn't in all cases. And this is exactly what we're trying to approach. So if you can help us spread that word, we'll be happy. With our team in Barcelona, we have now grown to 3 to sit down with people and do some trial calls with our product as well.
Yeah, exactly. And in the show notes under the video, I will link, of course, to your website so people could actually contact you and do this, and as well to this article, because as you said, this article you published a few, I think 1 or 2 weeks ago about profitability is something that's still being shared right now on LinkedIn, because it's, I'm not say it's pre-science, but it was incredibly timely. And what you just explained about the cost and rest, I think is partially in there in this article. So that's why I will again link to it as reference in the as a show notes. So thank you again for your time.
Thank you, Thibaut.
Let you enjoy your family and try to have a quick walks with them. And I hope to see you in person very soon.
Same here. Stay healthy, Thibaut. And thanks for everything you do for our industry. Really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Take care.